you've caught yourself thinking about your career in biopharma lately, and part of that process has included an inkling of doubt that you're not doing enough, this episode of the Business of Biotech is about to either inspire you or make you feel terrible about yourself. I'm Matt Pillar, and my guest on today's show is an MD who early in his career was on the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Lisbon, clinical registrar and research fellow at the University of Birmingham, and a practicing physician. Then he joined industry as medical director at Wellcome before its acquisition by Glaxo and GSK, and served as medical director for Abbott Labs' operations in Portugal. Then he played a hand in regulatory work as vice chairman of the New Drugs Committee at Portuguese regulatory authority Infarmed, and as a member of the European Medicines Agency's Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use. Then it was back to industry when he became VP of the International Medical Organization for BMS, then VP of Clinical Regulatory and Medical Affairs at Nabi Pharmaceuticals, then VP of Global Medical Affairs at UCB, then EVP and COO at TXCell, and then Chief Medical Officer at Bone Therapeutics. Then he tried his hand at captaining biotech ships as CEO at Zelluna Immunotherapy, then back to Bone for a few years in the CEO's chair, in addition to serving as entrepreneur in residence at AdBio. Today, he's a board member and chairman of multiple committees for the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. He's associate professor at the University of Lisbon. He's founder and managing director of MC4TX. He's executive chairman of the board of directors at StemBond. He's non-executive director at Swarm Oncology. He's CEO at Kiji Therapeutics, and most recently he was appointed president of ISCT, the International Society for Cell and Gene Therapy. Like I said, you're either inspired right now or wondering why you're so lazy. But either way, you might have guessed by now that my guest on today's show is the tireless Dr. Miguel Forte. Dr. Forte, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. And thank you for that introduction. Very thorough, very detailed. I hope it inspires. As you were going through, it told me, oh, I've had quite a bit of fun along the way. So
how are you? Where does the energy come from? This is what I want to know. Where does the energy come from?
I think the energy comes from that fun, from the excitement, from actually owning what you do and impacting others in doing it. I'm very curious. I like the projects that I bite on, and I really throw myself completely at the things that I am doing. So that's where the energy comes from. It also comes from the fact that those around me allow me to devote the energy to those things.
Yeah, important to build your team, build the people around you to support all these endeavors. I want to start with your recent appointment as president at ISCT, the International Society for Cell and Gene Therapy. For those who are not familiar, as you know, the Business of Biotech covers a wide gamut of biotech, from traditional biologic therapies through cell and gene technologies. So for those who are maybe not familiar with ISCT, tell us a little bit about ISCT and what its mission is.
Sure. Now, ISCT is the International Society of Cell and Gene Therapy. It's an organization that started very much as an academic organization, but grew to bring together all different players in cell and gene therapy. Academics, regulatory people, and very recently also industry. I was actually instrumental in bringing industry into ISCT. The mission is to enable the adequate development of new cell and gene therapy products for the benefit of patients. And I think this is important because it focuses on doing it well and adequately from one side, but also checking that those that are not adequately developed and proven cell therapies are also identified and pointed so that they don't continue to lead patients into the wrong way. So the mission is a global mission, a mission to bring all those players together with that clear vision of bringing benefit to patients in cell and gene therapy. The fun about it is precisely by interconnecting all those elements, i.e. the science, the business that comes with it, the regulatory decisions, the risk-taking or not risk-taking, and above all, the benefit for the patients. And being global has the opportunity of learn from each different region and bring those learnings to regions elsewhere. I'm going to go on to a tour in Asia, tomorrow, and I'll be speaking in Singapore and then going to Taiwan, really because there's a lot of expansion there, and we as a society want to help that, foster that, be part of that development.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about about how that mission is executed in practice. I know that ISCT holds at least one very important and well-attended conference annually where a lot of companies present data. What other venues are there or avenues for companies to get involved and to share information and sort of have that effect that you're describing?
Yeah, so I think there's multiple aspects about it. One is the membership. You can have individual membership. So you as an interested person, as a professional in the field, can become a member. But also your organization, be it a lab, be it a research center, be it an industry company. That membership provides a network opportunity. You sit in committees, you discuss, you learn. So it's above all that sharing of opinion. Then when you bring all those opinions together, it becomes a key opinion leader organization by setting guidance, by publishing white papers. And then we bring all of this together in terms of network, exchanging of experience and communicating of leadership opinion in the meetings. And we have one annual meeting that happens oscillates between Europe and the US. And then we have regional meetings. I mentioned to you, I'm going to talk at a regional meeting in Singapore. I'm going to have a regional meeting in Europe for the end of the year. Those moments are moments of gathering, moments of sharing opinion, moments of network, but also moments where you can communicate your most recent research and discuss. We have a particular focus on those meetings to have what we call roundtables, where slides are not presented, but the audience is asked to discuss, precisely to have that engagement, that interaction, that discussion. And we're also very keen on young researchers. We have a program to those that start their professional life, able to engage with others, with the leaders, learn and take professional opportunities. So we see ourselves as setting the standards, being an opinion leader organization, and a forum for network and exchange of views. I was introduced to the organization when I moved into cell and gene therapy by Bruce Levine, and I was fascinated with the science, fascinated with the passion of those involved in the field, and fascinated with the opportunity of impacting and not only contributing to the field, but taking from the field to my daily job in the companies or other organizations I was active in.
Yeah. Were you, you told me that that Bruce Levine introduced you to ISCT some time back, and you've held various positions in ISCT since that introduction. But I remember you telling me that that you were really surprised, sort of shocked. I'm assuming that this exposure was sort of early in your foray into cell and gene technologies, because I remember you telling me that one of the things that shocked you was the potential value that cell and gene therapies could bring to patients.
Yeah.
What sort of, I guess I'd like you to sort of, I don't know, compare and contrast where you came from with this, throwing yourself back into those earlier days, this new exposure to cell and gene therapies.
Yeah, so I started to work with Bruce, Kurt Gunther, and others on the society about 15 years ago when I moved into cell and gene therapy. And I went to the first annual meeting. And it was really a bit of a cultural shock. Previous to that, I had launched an anti-TNF for autoimmune diseases and was actually the third anti-TNF. So it was well-established fields with well-defined commercial relationships and moved into cell and gene therapy where it was predominantly academic. This was probably 10 years before the first product in cell and gene therapy came to really I mean, the first significant product came out. So when I went into the first meeting, I saw the huge potential, a potential of really going to the core of the pathogenesis, the core of the disease, and be able to have long-term benefit or even cure a disease. That was a transformational moment. We have here a very impactful new technology or series of new technologies. But at the same time, I realized that there was a long way to go for the industrialization, for the translational aspect of taking that science into a product and making it get to patients. We still have those challenges in cell and gene therapy today because of the complexity of the technology and the difficulty of the access. We really need to transform the science into a product and then make that product available to the patients. And I saw a long journey ahead of us at that meeting. So it was a kind of the wonder of the benefit and the awareness of the challenge that really got me into it. And I actually like those two things. I mean, I like the passion of a fantastic new thing, and I actually like the challenges. So.
Yeah, you also told me at that time that that one of the things you looked forward to was the potential for scientists to have a lot of fun doing what they do, developing these therapies.
Yeah, because the science is complex, but needs in its dissection, in its explanation. When I tend to speak, I say that small molecules is kind of unidimensional. Biologics is kind of two-dimensional, but cells is three-dimensional. The complexity, how you harness the mechanism of action of a cell, it's like a text or a sound or a film versus a live person. You can never control your product completely because the cell has multiple elements that are at the same time acting. So it's the fun of trying to manage that from the scientific point of view, setting the hypothesis, confirming the hypothesis, and translating it into a product. And so, yeah, and I must say also that because the group of people, they all share this passion, the passion of developing the science, exciting science with relevant products and benefit to patients, it becomes a community that you like to belong to.
Yeah. You know, your career up until that point was storied. I mean, it's not an overstatement to say that it was storied. You'd made a lot of progress. You'd done a lot of great things. You'd done those things in more, as you said, traditional and established biologic spaces, you know, antibodies and anti-TNF, to your point. When you did you or do you feel any sense of trepidation or uncertainty when you step into an entirely new arena?
Yes, but I like that. You know, I think it's good to experience new things. I like to always be in a situation that I control something, but not everything, and there's always a new element. I was approached to actually join TXL. That was actually my first really cell and gene therapy, and when I was approached, I realized this is probably the next generation of medical development. In my early stage of my career, when I finished my training, I was involved with the first HIV patients in Portugal. So I did my thesis on HIV and had an opportunity to go for one significant revolution, one significant event in the medical history, which was the HIV and being able to be associated with the first clinical trials with the first products. And I felt the same thing when I came to cell and gene therapy, because I realized we're at the dawn of a new era in terms of products. And it's actually very fascinating that today we use that virus, that is the HIV virus, modified to use it for gene engineering the cells. And that tells me that our ability to deal with a challenge, transform it into an opportunity, be able to have the science behind it always with a focus, which is deal with the disease, manage the virus, and make a use of it for the next generation of medical development. So yes, I felt the trepidation of walking into a new era, But there was the excitement of being able to impact, learn, and see new things.
Yeah. One of the other things we talked about was the global reach of ISCT, and it's interesting. I was thinking about that, your commentary around the global reach and the importance behind having global reach, and for people like you who are deep in the space, for people like me who cover the space, primarily from my perspective, primarily from the in the context of the United States and Europe. The A lot of the global considerations in this nascent technology are easily forgotten, right? Like one of the things that you mentioned was ethics. I think in the US and in Europe, where cell and gene therapies have really taken a foothold and where much of the progress has come from, we've seen, the evolution away from some unfounded and some very well-founded ethical concerns. I'm curious about well, one, a two-part question. What do you see as ISCT's sort of global responsibility in fostering cell and gene therapies? And then what's that ethical element? What are you seeing out there in terms of where there are still ethical battles to be waged?
Yeah, I mean, you touch on a very important point for me because when I decided to kind of run for president and take on the role, um, I had this motto, which is a global presence for local impact. And is really part of my agenda, not only internally as an organization, but really externally to make sure that we have that global presence. Because, I mean, science is global and medical need is global. What is not global is the capacity to pay, the capacity to deliver these products, and the capacity to really have the infrastructure for this. And I think we have a responsibility because science is global and the medical need is also global to try to make those two objectives meet. And so ISCT has the opportunity, because of that global membership, to not only monitor, learn from everything that is happening, and exchange the experience.
Mm.
I mean, I'll give you two things. I think it's important that we tackle, from an ethical perspective and from a responsibility in the field perspective, the access to patients. And for these therapies to be delivered, they need to have a certain level of infrastructure, not only for the supply chain, but also the knowledge to administer and monitor the use of them. And ISCT contributes to that in terms of the teaching. And we need to acknowledge that we have an ethical responsibility for the regions where the structure is not present to try to foster that. But also very important is the price of these products, and we need to integrate the multiple aspects go into the price of these products. It's the investment into them. It's a transformational event that gives you a cure and consequently avoids a certain elements of costs. But also on the other side comes on the opportunity cost and the affordability, which, if science is global, affordability is definitely not global and varies from region to region. And I think it's important that we don't avoid these difficult discussions. And I feel particularly well positioned to tackle this challenge, which is not an easy one, which is, as an industrial, as an academic, as a physician which treated patients and still cares for what is the benefit of the individual patient or the patient population, for us to tackle it. And we see some regions, Brazil, India, taking some approaches to make the delivery of these products available. And we need to foster that, understanding at the same time that we cannot curtail or impact negatively the innovation. And it's the balance between the two. And I go back to the HIV challenge. I mean, we had the same challenge at the time. I still remember being involved in those discussions. It's a review of that to a next level with the different parameters, but with the same principle. And the ethical principles are crucial here. I mean, what we do is fun. The science is enjoyable, but what we do it for is for the benefit of patients. And as I said before, the need is global. The capacity to deliver these products for multiple reasons is not global, and we need to find a way to bring that together.
Yeah. this being your charge as the newly appointed president at ISCT, you've had some time to think about it. I understand there's quite a long sort of president-elect cycle, and as I said, you were also you held various capacities in the organization prior to becoming president-elect. So you've had some time to think about it. And this globality and sort of ethical charge being a mantle that you've taken on in your new role there. What can you share with us about the how? Like, for instance, it occurs to me that to have that that patient impact and affordability play, perhaps maybe I don't want to make any assumptions, but perhaps maybe part of it is manipulating or adjusting who's at the table, right? Like, what are some of the, like, do you have plans to sort of expand influence within ISCT? Do you have what are some of the plans that you're thinking about or implementing?
Yeah, there's different things that need to be considered.
Yeah.
First of all is the technical aspect, right? I think we need to continue improve the technology that is used to develop these products. And we're seeing, decentralized manufacturing, automated and closed system manufacturing, and the ability of taking this to faraway geographies. Even within well-developed countries like the US, there's some regions inside the US where the facilities are not well catered for. And so we need to bring the ability to produce closer to the patient. At the same time, we also need to consider how can we bring that to other regions where the infrastructure is even less adapted. And that's where we come in terms of training, setting the standards, and helping those sites to learn. So one thing is the technical development, the other one is the training and the infrastructure. And then obviously we come to the elements of finance, which is important in terms of how can we, respecting intellectual property, respecting the need for development, respecting the return on investment, but really adapt it to different circumstances and different capabilities locally. And so the forum for discussion and the forum for opinion leader within ISCT is one of the things that we wanted to do. And as you said, bring them together. ISCT at the last annual meeting in Vancouver that you pointed out to, the day before we gathered regulators from all over the world, from the US, from Europe, the MHRA in Switzerland, from Asian countries, Japan, Taiwan, and it was a meeting that was not open. It was selected by invitation so that we could have a discussion among the regulators. And the objective, I could summarize the objective in two aspects: calibrate the risk-taking attitude on regulatory decisions and tackle the access with the elements of training, pricing, affordability, and access. And I think that forum for discussion, being able to be a player that brings everybody together, I mean, difficult decisions are difficult. Difficult discussions and decisions are always, as a by definition, difficult and challenging, but we need to take them. And I think we're in a particularly good position to bring those players together. So that's the element. Also, another thing that we've touched there, and I think it's important, which goes also from a proactive point of view in the ethics, is making sure that as we play more and more with our genetic structure, that we know how to do it properly and we set the boundaries. I mean, we cannot do anything that we want to do. It needs to be done with a purpose, with a stepwise approach, with a regulatory oversight, with an ethical conscious. And I think setting the standards for that is another thing that I'm also quite keen in, involving other organizations, because ISCT is one player. There are other players as well, and bring all those players together to make sure that we have this proactive ethical attitude for access, for the things that we do, for pricing, for the technical elements. And again, if we do that, we should not do that for Europe. We should do that globally. And that's where I think ISCT becomes a cornerstone of that discussion.
Yeah. Very good. You mentioned HIV earlier, and you said that in your new capacities, you've been able to pull a little bit from the HIV playbook that you were played a key role in so many years ago. And I'm curious about where else you're able to pull from your history in small molecules and vaccines and traditional biologics development in the capacity you have now at ISCT and Kiji and others. And I want to tackle that from both sides of the equation. Like what translated, like what do you still pull from that serves you well? And then on the flip side of that, like what doesn't translate? What do you have to go and relearn to move into and be impactful in this space?
I mean, I must say I've been very fortunate because those different experiences not only give me fun, but also give me the opportunity of learn and then translate that learnings into a new situation. When I moved into TXL, there was a very exciting group of people focused on the science. And I came from a very well organized large pharma with all the processes. And I realized, okay, this is an opportunity of bringing those processes and structure the approach. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we were developing medicinal products. And in fact, there is a process, there is an attitude, there is a certain set of parameters that need to be applied to whatever kind of product, small molecules, vaccines. But I mean, it's the generation of the right evidence. So I was able to bring that structure. And probably that was the moment where I realized there was fun on startup organizations because you have a raw material that you're able to shape. And having those previous well-structured large pharma experiences, I was able to impact there. So I would say, and I said it before, when you develop a cell therapy product, the mindset is not different than developing a small molecule. What changes is the specificity of the product, the technology behind it. I mean, I always use this example. You can very simply sterilize a small molecule. You cannot sterilize your final product that is a cell because you're actually going to kill the product. So, but nevertheless, you need to provide sterility for both. So it's the principle that is applicable to any of these products, but then the specificity is declined according to the specific product. And it was clear to me that duality, and it was important because when you go to the regulators and I say, I've developed this, I generated the evidence, I went through the clinical trials the way you would expect. But by the way, here are the aspects that relate particularly to the product. The mechanism of action is, as I mentioned before, is also very complex. And that's where we come to a very dear concept for the regulators in this context, which is potency. Potency, which is probably, if you measure in a small molecule, is just the quantity of the substance. Potency here needs to be the activity of the cell and the mechanism of action. And how do you define that? Saying that this cell with this potency is going to do what we want the cell to do. This is a product. And so it's that specificity that I realized that was applicable only to living products that are cell and gene therapy products. But nevertheless, the framework is the same as any of the other developments in terms of, clinical pharmacology, preclinical, and all those elements. And that was another element of fun because I could bring something from my previous life, learn from the new life that I was having, and not only benefit myself, but bring benefit to the discussion.